Everyone.
America, that we have the same
right now, we have
attitude about healthcare, about
the
education,
Secretary of
about infrastructure.
Defense, Pete Hegseth,
But the problem is,
and
we have a
General
$40
Raisin
trillion
King
debt,
is
and we
they're
insist on
testifying
cutting taxes for absolutely everybody,
about
so
their
we
budget
reduce the amount of
before the
revenue that
House
is
Armed
available
Services
to
Committee.
that. We also have to have a
I'm just going to
national
bring,
security
while we're
strategy
listening
that
in, it's just
lives
the opening
within
statements
a
of the
sound
chairs, but
fiscal
this should be
picture.
entertaining.
Most experts
While
would
we're
say
doing this, I'm going to
that
bring
the most
in.
profound threat
I'm just going to
to
bring
our
some
national
folks. I'm going to
security
bring
right
in
now is
some
exactly
chats
that,
here.
is our fiscal picture. How are we going to continue to be able to afford to fund the things we need to fund as we run the debt ever higher? The other thing worth worrying about is the Pentagon has not yet passed an audit. If we give them what is roughly a 50 to 60% increase, is that money going to be well spent? We have every reason to doubt that. Now, I will say, and I praise the chairman, this committee, and in a bipartisan, bicameral way, we have tackled the problem of acquisition reform. I think last year's bill put us on a good trajectory to get to the point where we can, in fact, innovate faster at scale. I also believe the Pentagon has been working on that. We've had many meetings with Deputy Secretary Feinberg, who is focused on that, but we got a long way to go. Can the Pentagon really absorb another $500–600 billion, depending on what the supplemental and the reconciliation package are? I don't think so. We need to pay as much attention to how we're spending the money as to how much we're spending, and we never seem to do that. But the larger problem is the strategy package. I don't think so. Through the Secretary's remarks, and I've heard you give speeches before about this, about how realism is our strategy. And I find that absurd, and given what we are doing. You can say a lot of things about the strategy, but calling it realistic? We started a full-scale war in the Middle East against Iran to try to reshape the Middle East. Now, we can talk about that in a bunch of different ways, but it is the exact opposite of realism. And in fact, starting wars in the Middle East that get out of control and lead us to have far greater costs for the benefits is one of the cornerstones of the unrealistic strategy that this administration has criticized over and over and over again. And yet here we are in a full-scale Mideast war, and we've seen the costs of that. Certainly at the top of that list is 13 service members killed
if you're
and hundreds
just
wounded, but it goes way beyond
If you're just
that.
joining us, Pete
Hegseth
Hegseth is going to be testifying
before
the House Armed Services Committee. This is just the opening statements. This is Representative Adam Smith. He's the chair, the Democratic chair. We just heard the Republican chair give his opening remarks. I think this should be an entertaining hearing, but we'll see.
Causing greater chaos throughout the Middle East. We've seen the impact on the economy. Certainly here at home, gas prices up by over $1. The impact of the fertilizer increase is going to come later as food prices skyrocket. But what is happening to us is a small part of what's happening to the rest of the world. Certainly the Middle East's economy has been tossed up in the air, but dozens of countries are rationing gasoline as we speak and experiencing extreme economic pain because of this war. So there's nothing realistic about that. And one of the big questions that we need to get answered today is, where is this going? What is the plan to achieve our objectives?
There is no plan, and it's going going nowhere. We know that, but it's a great question, and ask that to Hegseth. I'm looking forward to hearing that. Hey, Paul, hey, Z.
And again, that is an incredible accomplishment. From a tactical
Joan,
standpoint,
Gloria,
I think the proficiency of our military
Raj, how are you guys?
display.
Thank you for being here.
But we're not in this for a tactical advantage. We're in this to fundamentally change Iran. And as we sit here today, Iran's nuclear program is exactly what it was before this war started. They have not lost their capacity to inflict pain. They still have a ballistic missile program. They're still able to blockade the Strait of Hormuz and have the ships that are capable of doing that.
Now they can also charge a toll.
To get that to change. And most disturbingly, the president keeps telling us that it's over. What was it, a week ago Friday, the president announced that Iran had agreed to give up their nuclear program, to give up their ballistic missile program, to stop terrorist groups, to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The only problem with that is literally none of that was true. He was completely making it up. It wasn't. Iran hadn't even agreed to meet with us, as became embarrassingly clear as the day spun out and poor J.D. Vance had to keep going back and forth to the airport. We never even had a meeting. So wish fulfillment is not really a strategy. I mean, maybe the president thinks he's doing some sort of Jedi mind trick and can tell Iran, you will give up your nuclear weapons, and they automatically will. But that's not
pretty
working.
funny.
So what we need to hear today is what is going to work. We have 50,000 troops in the region who are still at risk. How are those tactical victories going to translate into some sort of strategic success? And by the way, this is one of the things that realism recognizes. You can win a whole lot of little small battles and lose the war, which is why you don't stumble into the war in the first place.
And we haven't even won a lot of small battles.
But at the same time, we're doing all of this on our own as we increasingly push away all of our allies. Sometimes just because we want to do what we want to do, we don't want to have to consult them. Sometimes just gratuitously insulting them. I mean, in the middle of this war where we were asking NATO to come join us, the president took time out to insult President Macron and his wife. Okay, how is that helping us to try and belittle everybody in the world? And I also, for the people who are criticizing NATO over this war, I will remind people that NATO is a defensive alliance. What that means is every country in it pledges to defend a country if attacked. And when we were attacked on 9/11, that's what NATO did. They put in Article 5, and for 20 years they fought beside us. NATO is not if any one of the countries decides to unilaterally and unwisely start a war precipitously that everyone else is supposed to join. That's not the way it works. So berating and belittling our allies after we did that and driving them ever
I know
further
this guy's
away
kind of
from
dull.
how is that realistic?
But this is
not only are
but
we
he's
going to
so
try to
on point.
reshape the
It is
Middle East,
it is
but we're
such
going to do it alone.
a killer opening
we're
statement, even though it's not
away from
emotional.
us. And then we have other tools in our arsenal. You see that those numbers on the budget, but the State Department's really important. Development is really important. These are ways to achieve our ends, and we have moved away from that. We got rid of the entire USAID, literally causing the starvation of children in countries where we had pledged to provide food.
HIV, and disease control in other countries.
We
gone
have
with the
sidelined again
USAID
the entire
being gone.
world. France and the UK have brought together 44 different countries that have an interest in trying to open up the Strait of Hormuz. We've pushed them all aside. And then we've even pushed aside our own diplomatic corps. We have a very, very talented State Department. I praise today the talent of our military, and I will stand by that. They deserve that praise. Our diplomatic corps deserves that praise, too. But we shoved them all to the side in favor of two real estate guys who are going to go negotiate all the deals in the
Jared
world.
Kushner, the idiot's
date,
son-in-law,
by
the
way,
village
has
idiot's
yielded
son-in-law,
exactly
and Steve Witkoff, the
nothing.
village idiot's
So it's
real estate lawyer. There are
realistic about
negotiators
starting a
with
war in the
Iran.
Middle East, going it alone, and pushing aside all diplomacy and all development and all other tools in our arsenal. And on top of that, of course, we also want to dominate the entire Western Hemisphere, including apparently annexing Canada and invading Greenland. How is any of that realistic? And then the administration comes before us and asks for what is a hopelessly unrealistic budget in this environment. Back on that chart there, when we were showing how much money we were spending on defense, we had a balanced budget. We had a surplus many years. We don't have that anymore. So call this strategy whatever you want to call it, but please don't call it realism. It's not. Forgive me, it reminds me of one of my favorite lines from A Princess Bride. It's a tense morning. I want to lighten it up a little bit. But the guy keeps saying, inconceivable, when things happen. And finally, the guy says to him, you keep using that word. I don't think you know what it means. I don't think we know what the word realism means. So please, can we not have the realism conversation? Let's have the conversation about what the strategy actually is. And I'm sure you have a different definition of it than I do. But as I look at it, the strategy seems to be to use as much violence, as much threats, as much coercion as possible to bend the world to our will. I think that is a very dangerous strategy.
Brilliant.
Because one of the oldest cliches in the military is the enemy gets a vote. And we may think that we can stand up and talk tough and talk about how strong we are and how we're burying our enemies and they're begging for a deal. We can do that all day long, all right? But the enemy gets a vote. They don't have to do what we tell them to.
And they're not doing anything,
that
that the village idiot is telling them to do. They're doing everything he's not telling them to do.
The chairman is absolutely right. And this is one area where I strongly disagree with the folks on the far left who say that we don't really face any threats, that the U.S. is a malign influence in the world and always has been. I don't agree with that. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, variety of other transnational terrorist groups, including, yes, narco-terrorists and human traffickers over here. They all are trying to weaken us. all right? They don't want a rules-based order. They want to play by their own rules. They want to push us aside. We want to be the side that stands up for the rules. But if what we're saying to the rest of the world is stick with us because we're a better bully than China, we coerce countries more effectively, that undercuts the very message we're trying to spread to build the coalition we need to be successful. I also worry about the values that we're showing the world. When the
This is an unusually long opening statement for a congressman in a hearing, but it's so good.
That is the message coming out of the United States of America. If we are going to be this big, powerful force that throws our weight around the world wants to know at a minimum that we're doing it for the right reasons and with a sense of values to protect people, not to destroy entire civilizations. And we all hear that and we all go, well, gosh, he probably doesn't mean it.
Well, we didn't know that the idiot didn't mean it when he said it. We just found out a few hours later that he wasn't going to do it.
We're supposed to be the United States of America. I grew up on stories of the U.S. at the end of World War II being the country that the Germans wanted to surrender to, not the Russians, because they knew they could trust our values. We don't seem to care about those values.
Amen.
No rules of engagement. Give them no quarter. All right? That is not who we are supposed to be. And just one final point on that, the girls' school that got hit in the first days of this war. There is absolutely no question at this point what happened. We made a mistake, and that happens in war. We identified this target based on earlier charts, and yet 2 months after it happened, we refused to say anything about it.
Still now.
Giving the world the impression that
somebody will ask Hegseth about it now. He'll say there's an investigation.
We do not care about the casualties and the chaos that is caused by our war, and we should care, even if we want to prosecute that war. Now, I agree with the chairman. We need a strategy. We face the most complex threat environment that we've faced in a very, very long time. So we really want to hear from the administration. Don't give us this realism, chest-thumping stuff. What are we really going to do to meet those threats, to deal with the challenges we face? And I'll close by saying one of the other ironies of this, of course, is we have a great example in the world right now of what our strategy should be and where our values should be, and that's Ukraine.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious, here we are, we roll out the red carpet for Vladimir Putin. We belittle and insult President Zelensky in the White House. He has no cards, right? Well, here we are a year after that. Looks like he had a couple cards to play because Ukraine is actually winning against Russia. Ukraine, a sovereign democracy standing up against a brutal, oppressive, coercive dictatorship. And we can't even bring ourselves on a consistent basis to say, we are with Ukraine and we are against what Putin is doing, and stand up and support them.
Absolutely.
So I want to see that strategy to meet the complex threat environment that we have. But simply saying we've already won and boasting and bragging and trying to belittle and insult the entire world, that's not going to get us to the posture that we need. So I hope we have a conversation about how we can build a strategy that makes sense and is actually realistic. With that, I yield back.
I thank the ranking member for his opening statement. Now I'd like to introduce our...
I got to tell you, that was a hell of an opening statement. If you're just joining us, this is Drunken Pete Hegseth and General Kane are going to be testifying in front of the House Armed Services Committee on the ridiculous $1.5 trillion budget that they want. That was the opening statement, which was stellar by the Democratic chair of this committee.
And with that, Mr. Secretary, we'll start
with you. This is the Republican chair, and he's got a hell of a toupee.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Smith, distinguished members of the committee, we appreciate the opportunity to testify in full support of President Trump's historic $1.5 trillion fiscal year 2027 budget request for the Department of War. The President's budget request reflects the urgency of the moment, addressing both the deferment of longstanding problems as well as positioning our forces for both the current and the future fight. We think divesting to invest is a strategy of austerity. I'm honored to appear alongside General Dan Kane, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as well as Jay Hurst, our Comptroller, or Chief Financial Officer. I'd like to start by thanking this committee and Congress for your partnership in securing the investments needed for a stronger, prouder, and more secure America. I think what our troops have demonstrated to the world over the last 15 months are a reflection of that. A nation's ability to build, innovate, and support the critical needs of its warfighters at speed and at scale is the foundation upon which its survival rests. However, upon taking office on January 20th, 2025, President Trump inherited a defense industrial base that had been hollowed out by years of America Last policies, resulting in a diminished ability to project strength. Under the previous administration, we were focused on offshoring and outsourcing, riddled with cost overruns and degraded capabilities. Under the leadership of President Trump, our builder-in-chief, we are reversing this systemic decay and putting our defense industrial base back on a wartime footing. If you ask anyone at our Pentagon, urgency
he is such an imbecile.
We're rebuilding a military that the American people can be proud of.
Such an asshole.
One that instills nothing less than unrelenting fear in our adversaries and the utmost confidence in our allies. We fight to win in every scenario. The $1.5 trillion FY27 budget put forward by the President will build upon the historic $1 trillion FY26 top line and continue to reverse the 4 years of underinvestment and mismanagement of the Biden administration. The $1.5 trillion budget will ensure the United States continues to maintain the world's most powerful and capable military as we grapple with a complex threat environment across multiple theaters. Not to mention, this budget also includes a historic troop pay increase, 7% for lower enlisted, and the budget eliminates all poor or failing barracks. Quality of life for our troops is front and center in this budget as well. By supercharging our industrial capability and transforming how the department does business, we're restoring American commercial dominance.
He's tripping over his words a little bit, which is unusual for Hegseth. I don't know if maybe he didn't have his slow-moving double shot of rum or his rum and coke before he came on here. But we'll see how he goes when he's getting questioned directly.
From a bureaucratic model to a business model, 180. Decisively moving from an acquisition environment paralyzed by bureaucratic red tape into an outcomes-driven organization focused on delivering the most at cost, at scale for taxpayer dollars. Over the past year, through historic multi-year procurement agreements,
how many times has he said historic
business
already?
Deals for things like critical munitions and capabilities, we've sent an unambiguous demand signal to industry partners to
What is
build
an
more
unambiguous
and build
demand
faster.
signal?
The result has been a surge, a revitalization of our great American factories and a massive reinvestment.
Did he say
in the
factories?
skilled
I don't know what
American
that is
workers
either.
Who serve as the industrial muscle
Factory. I'm going to write that one down.
Warriors. Let me briefly provide you with some concrete high-level metrics of what's been accomplished over just the past few months. These are announced new facilities and investments to support American warfighters, and I would refer you to the screen. The department has helped stimulate more than 250 private investment deals in 39 states, in 180 cities, and 150 companies worth more than $50 billion. It's resulted in 280 new or expanded facilities, more than 18 million new square feet of American manufacturing, and more than 70,000 new jobs in defense.
70,000 new jobs.
This is the key
Hang
part
on,
of
shut
this.
up for a second, Pete.
These $50 billion of investment.
Let me just fact check you in real
plants.
time. We're currently at 4.4% unemployment, heading to 5% unemployment. We are in a jobs recession right now. The U.S. economy has added zero net jobs in the entire time. That when you calculate the amount of jobs added per month and the amount of jobs lost, zero net jobs since Donald Trump has been president of the United States. DOGE hammered out the entire Defense Department. So the industry, the one industry that is increasing jobs, where you would see numbers by like 70,000, would be healthcare. So the U.S. Department of Defense did not add 70,000 jobs. Now let's listen to Pete again. I won't fact check every 2 seconds, but I will when something particularly stupid and egregious comes out. Fortunately, the Democrats will be there to do it for me as well, but let me just stop.
and help to ensure that our warfighters are able to defend the American dream and all American made. Together with the help of the policy updates and appropriations passed by Congress, President Trump's War Department has begun to turn the lights back on in manufacturing towns across this country, and once again, forging a lethal arsenal of freedom. Where critical supply chains are threatened, the War Department has acted decisively to inject capital, stimulate production, and prevent adversarial exploitation. We are firing up the American economic engine and at every level of our defense industrial base. Every policy we pursue, every budgetary item we request serves to ensure the department remains laser-focused on increasing lethality and survivability of our forces from the front lines to the factory floors. This is a historic budget, as you said, Mr. Chairman. This is a fiscally responsible
He said historic 4 times so far,
but
I think there were more, but that's what I've been counting now.
And speaking of warfighting, the topic of Iran, I'm sure will come up today, which I very much welcome discussing. I look forward to sharing the incredible successes of our military, achieved in a matter of weeks. President Trump, unlike other presidents, has had the courage to ensure Iran never gets a nuclear weapon, and he's ironclad in that. We have the best negotiator in the world driving that deal. The biggest challenge, the biggest adversary we face at this point are the reckless, feckless, and defeatist words of congressional Democrats.
What a coward
some
he is.
Republicans.
What a coward.
2 months in, I remind you, 2 months in to a conflict. Lest I remind you, and my generation understands how long we were in Iraq, how long we were in Afghanistan, how long we were in Vietnam. 2 months in,
the amount of
on
damage,
an existential fight for the safety of the American people.
I can't listen to you
Iran.
for a second. Shut up, Pete. 2 months in, today the average price of gasoline at the pump is $4.23 a gallon. The average natural gas is incredibly expensive. The farmers, in addition to an economic catastrophe that we're potentially facing because inflation is kicking up exponentially right now, on top of the tariff nonsense, our farmers who can't get or afford fertilizer anymore because so much of that fertilizer comes through the Strait of Hormuz, we're facing a potentially catastrophic agricultural season in the U.S. that is going to be unbelievable in the grocery store. So in just 2 months, I think we need to reframe. And I know General Kane is speaking. I'm going to bring him up in just a moment, but I have almost less patience than I do for him than I do with him than I do with Hegseth. And by the way, guys, just to let you know when I do cover these congressional hearings, it's not fair and balanced coverage of a hearing. I don't operate that way. I think we've reached a point where the Republicans have proven themselves so incompetent. Republicans in Congress have proven themselves so inept. They have proven themselves to be such desperate Trumpian ass kissers that unless I think it's a particular Republican whose testimony is going to be entertaining because we could aggressively pick it apart, I probably won't listen to them. I will probably shut them out and mute them and just babble while they're talking because I can't even fucking stand to listen to them anymore. I can't hear what they have to say anymore. Unless again, it's like someone like Thomas Massie who is going to speak sensibly about the war and about the consequences of the war, the economic, the geopolitical, and the human consequences of the war. We can listen to Pete babble about, babble like a drunken Trumpian propagandist that he is when the Democrats are hammering him. But if you really want to, I just want to be upfront with you guys. If you want a fair and balanced assessment of these particular hearings, this is not the place to get it. Head on to C-SPAN, watch the hearings for yourself, make your own judgment. This is going to be biased. It's going to be intentional, biased, and to a certain extent unreasonable because I've had it. So with this whole bunch of nonsense. So when Hegseth talks about the fact 2 months, it's only been 2 months and our war fighters are doing an amazing job and it's the fault of the Democrats. And he's going to eventually go to, because he's been hammering, it's the fault of the press. They better not be doing what they're doing because this is all their fault. Otherwise, we're incredible. When he makes that statement, I think it's imperative to reframe the reality, is that it's not that they've only had 2 months to achieve a great victory. They've had, in just 2 months, they have completely and further fucked up what was left of the U.S. economy. They have put farmers' backs against the wall right now because they are facing a catastrophic agricultural season that we are going to experience with certain produce shortages and much higher prices because there is no fertilizer available. We are paying more at the pump. Iran is in a better position today than Iran was in before this stupid war started. The Iranians are in full control of the Strait of Hormuz. They can decide whether or not they want to charge a $2 million per boat fee for every boat that comes through the strait, for every ship that comes through the strait. That's at the strait averages 100 ships a day. That is eventually, when things get back rolling again and the Iranians open up the strait, that is $200 million a day that the Iranians are going to split with Oman. That's $100 million a day that the Iranians can put toward their war machine, toward their foreign terrorist organizations, toward their effort to build a nuclear weapon. We have done absolutely nothing about the enriched uranium that the Iranians have that they can use to develop. Latest reporting suggests up to 12 nuclear weapons. We have done nothing but incentivize them because now they know they have a direct threat from the United States, and they know we have an incredibly weak, crazy, cowardly, and incompetent president and a drunken Secretary of Defense that, doesn't know where he is each day of the week, but he knows how to insult Democrats and the press to try to somehow make up for the epic fuck up that they are involved in. And we have a situation where the idiot in the White House is so desperate to get out of this war that he is, just yesterday he posted, I would show you right now, but I don't have it ready to go. He posted a meme on X, on Truth Social, of him standing with an automatic weapon, right? An AI-generated image of him standing with an automatic weapon, sunglasses, looking much thinner than he's ever capable of being, saying, "No more Mr. Nice Guy. Now he's going to go get the Iranians," right? And if they don't agree to a deal and open up the Strait of Hormuz. Just yesterday, the idiot posted on Truth Social that Iran contacted him. The Iranians called him and they let him know that their economy was completely collapsing and Iran was collapsing and that they had no leadership whatsoever and that they were begging the U.S. The motherfucker actually did this, my friends. He posted this. And Pete Hegseth and General Dipshit Kane here with straight faces can, sit here and tell us in front of the American people that they're doing something? Stop it. I feel better now that I've level set the moment. Let's bring General Raisin Kane back in. And I have no idea what he's talking about now in his opening statement, but we'll hear.
And the national industrial base, ensuring our military is ready, securing our military advantage. Within the joint force, the uniform side, our priorities remain the same, ensuring our warfighters are properly armed, globally integrated, and ready, while always taking care of our people. And what truly sets our people apart from other militaries around the world is the 1.8 million enlisted members of our force who maintain readiness beyond reproach and are the envy of every other nation. I'm joined today by the Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chairman, Dave Isom, who's here with me today representing the 1.8 million members of the enlisted force. He is a great American, not an Americant.
Oh, that's a good one. He's an American, not an Americant. What about an Amerishouldn't? You're an ass-kissing, Trump-loving general who has sold out your country to an imbecile.
They execute the
what about an Amerishouldn't?
Every day.
General
and coupled
Kane.
With the American spirit, outthink, outcompete, and relentlessly innovate, we will maintain our decisive edge, but doing so requires your partnership. We stand ready today to answer our nation's call. It remains the honor of a lifetime for me to serve alongside the members of this joint force. And as we sit here today in this important hearing, I ask us all to remember our deployed teammates who are out there right now doing our nation's business. And may we again always remember our fallen who've given us the gift of an
exactly
incredible
what I
example,
was going to bring
and
up,
their
General
family
Kane.
members.
What about the 13 U.S. service members who died in this war, right? Who thus far died for no reason, who thus far died so that Iran is in a better position than they were before the war started? What about the hundreds who have been injured, some of them severely with traumatic brain injuries, amputations? None of that was reported. That Central Command didn't cover it up, but it took them weeks and weeks and weeks to tell us about those who were severely injured. We were getting reports of 12 people killed and a couple of handfuls. Oh, hang on. Let me hear what Hegseth is about. Well, fuck Hegseth for a minute. What about them? And what about the fact that for the first time that in my recollection of U.S. military history since I've been paying attention to it, we had, the only time reports about the actual casualties came out, that Central Command told us the truth and the White House told us the truth, was after it was uncovered by actual credible news outlets. So fuck off, General Kane. Fuck off.
The munitions, established drone dominance, which we're continuing to do this day in this next budget funds. So getting in front of that budget cycle, which had been notoriously unpredictable, coming out of the continuing resolution of FY25, to fund this and then a historic bill in FY26, laid the groundwork for this historic budget to ensure that we're not coming at a cold start here. We came into this administration.
I've got him saying historic 7 times
tool.
So far.
We were able to use that through that one big beautiful bill to fund the priorities of this department. We spent on $4 billion on barracks, started immediately getting after the quality of life of barracks. Because of the austerity of the Biden administration, we traded off of maintenance, traded off of quality of life to try to fund other things operationally. This budget stops that cycle and both invests in sustainment and modernization, which is something that's critically important. So without that reconciliation bill, I think, Mr. Chairman, we'd be in a very different place. So thank you for that.
Great.
If only.
Well, as you are aware, the expansion of the defense industrial base is the principal focus of this year's NDAA. So in addition to enacting this budget request that's been submitted, we want to work with you to enhance the department's statutory authority. Just
on a side note, a slightly comical side note, and again, you could see this in a Democrat as well as a Republican, but we should get, could get behind additional budget dollars right now, congressional budget dollars for Mike Rogers' toupee, because it is a beautiful toupee. I mean, when they go back, when C-SPAN goes back to him after drunken Pete Hegseth stops babbling about nothing, I want you to take a good solid look at Mike Rogers' toupee, and I think we could actually potentially lead the world in in toupee manufacturing and exportation of toupees, because it's just an excellent toupee as they go. So just keep that in mind.
Critical, PAC-3s, SM-3s, SM-6s, THAADs, Patriots, Tomahawks, AMRAAMs, JASSMs, you name prisms, you name them. We were building them at too slow and too low a level. Now the companies are going to pay for those factories and those production lines. And when Congress gives those 5 to 7 year demand signals, they'll then fund it. Not just, hey, can we get 10
Me
more
neither,
per month?
305 all day. It's hard to watch
3x, 4x the production, pay for it now, and the companies invest accordingly. So it's been a critical aspect of some of what we've done so far, but we need more of those 5 to 7 year investments.
Great. General Kane, what does the $1.5 trillion budget mean for the warfighter and our ability to project forces and secure our interests around the globe?
Chairman, in my view, this represents a historic down payment on future security. If the budget is approved and ultimately deployed, as we look at the character of warfare changing very, very fast, what's layered in to this budget by our civilian leaders will allow us to start getting ahead of where technology is evolving. And as I mentioned, the character of warfighting is changing pretty quickly. Mass, simultaneity, autonomy, undersea, space, cyber, information, all of those ways that are now manifesting themselves on the battlefields around the world.
Is, as General Kane is talking about the future of warfare, and he's mentioning all of these different areas where you know that is the battlefront that we face today, and I'm sure all of that is accurate. If you think about the low-tech stupidity, the high-tech, low-tech... Oh, hang on. Democratic congressman is asking questions. Hang on.
Costs of the war. So just for the record, we'd like to get that as soon as possible. Certainly the munitions expended, but also underreported is we've had a fair amount of equipment destroyed, including 2 C-130s with the rescue of our downed airmen. So do you have either A, a cost estimate coming to us anytime soon, or B, a specific supplemental request?
Thank you for that question. So approximately at this day, we're spending about $25 billion on Operation Epic Fury. Most of that is in munitions. There's part of that is obviously O&M and equipment replacement. We will formulate a supplemental through the White House that will come to Congress once we have a full assessment of the cost of the conflict.
Sure. So you're saying the full cost at this point is $25 billion?
Yeah, that's our estimate for the cost.
Okay. Interesting, because we
$50
billion.
billion
Answered that question because we've been asking for a hell of a long time.
Was what,
no one's given us the number.
Reported last week, and that was
so if you could get
a
those
low
details
number
over to us, that would be great. Mr. Secretary, you mentioned the nuclear aspect of Iran and the war, and it is worth noting that every president prior to this one, including President Trump in his first term, also prevented Iran from getting a nuclear weapon without actually having to go to war in Iran. So we need to keep that in mind. But also, since the war started, Iran's nuclear arsenal has not been weakened in any way. And at the moment, in negotiations, what Iran is saying, basically pay us to open up the strait. That's their position, which is completely untenable. I agree. It's worth noting, of course, that the strait was open before the war started. Now we're negotiating to get back to status quo. And Iran's most recent offer is to say, we'll talk about nukes later. So what is the plan to actually turn all of this lethal kinetic action into an improvement in the nuclear situation? Because we haven't gotten there yet. Play it out for us. How does that happen? How does it actually lead to that result?
Well, I would take issue with the premise of the question that nothing was done. Operation Midnight Hammer was a very effective.
Well, I didn't say nothing was done. I said in this war.
Ultimately,
this war started.
Well, under this administration, unlike other administrations, which cut bad deals and pallets of cash with no ability to oversee whether Iran is actually pursuing a nuclear program.
Which is where
we're at. If we want to litigate JCPOA or the Iran deal, our view, the president's view, is that was a very bad deal.
Okay.
That gave them a bunch of money up front.
What's the future?
To fund, you talked about negotiated deals. Allowed them to fund their proxies and spread Hamas and Hezbollah all around the region, build up nuclear capabilities.
That's great. What are we going to do now?
President Trump has been clear-eyed, from the killing of Qasem Soleimani to the pulling out of the Iran deal to Midnight Hammer and now to this effort to recognize that you have to stare down this kind of enemy who's hell-bent on getting a nuclear weapon and get them to a point where they're at the table giving it up in a way that ensures they never have it.
So they haven't broken yet. Okay, we haven't gotten there yet. For all of the...
Well, their nuclear facilities have been obliterated. Underground, they're buried, and we're watching them 24/7. So we know where any nuclear material
reclaiming
might be.
my time for
we're watching
a quick second here. We had to start this war, you just said, 60 days ago, because the nuclear weapon was an imminent threat. Now you're saying that it was completely obliterated?
They had not given up their nuclear ambitions, and they had a conventional shield of thousands of...
So Operation Midnight Hammer accomplished nothing of substance. It left us at exactly the same place we were before. So much so that
their facilities were bombed and obliterated. Their ambitions continued, and they're building a conventional shield.
Let me try again.
It's the North Korea strategy. You know this very well. The North Korea strategy was use conventional missiles to prevent anybody from challenging them so they could slow walk their way to a weapon. President Trump saw Iran at its weakest moment, took an action to ensure, in a way that only the United States of America could do with our Israeli partners,
and yet
to ensure their conventional shield was brought to
one other
field,
question,
which we've done.
if I could get to it. So on Ukraine, a year plus ago, your advice, the president's advice, was Ukraine had no cards to play. They should go cut the best possible deal they could. Clearly that was wrong. What did you miss? What did you miss about the conflict between Russia and Ukraine that you didn't see that Ukraine was going to be capable of doing what they've done in the last 14 months?
What we didn't miss, and we're here in this committee, is that Joe Biden, with no accountability, gave hundreds of billions of dollars of our weapons to Ukraine.
Oh, good God.
To an outcome that never would have happened if President Trump was president. So he pulled out our, you guys don't talk about that. Ultimately, President Trump believes there should be a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. That serves
but you
the
didn't
best
expect
interests of both
Ukraine to
parties.
be where they're at right now. I'm asking you, just from a strategic standpoint, what
I think the Ukrainians have shown great courage, and I appreciate that Europe is now paying for any weapons that we provide.
All right, I yield back. Thank you.
All right, now I want to remind everybody, everybody wants to get their questions, so we are going to be sticking strictly to the 5-minute rule today. So with that, I recognize the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman Mike Rogers, for your leadership working with President Donald Trump. As the grateful father of 4 sons who have served overseas in Iraq, Egypt, and Afghanistan, I especially appreciate War Secretary Hegseth and Chief of Staff Kane for your competence, service, and
Gail,
success.
Military
families
Gail,
have never been more
I think, Gail, if you're on one of the other platforms now, I think Gail summed it up perfectly. Fuckwit. Right? That about sums up Hegseth. Hegseth did not answer the question about what is your plan. I think it's important to frame this while the Republicans babble incessantly and try to justify this. This insane situation that we find ourselves. It was a simple question, and the question really was just that the congressman was asking is, what is your plan moving forward? You have not, the goal was, the excuse for the war was that Iran was an imminent threat. They had a nuclear weapon ready to go. They were just about where they were there. They were almost there. Now, that was the second or third justification for the war. If you remember when the war started, the very first justification was regime change, because the village idiot thought that he was going to win the war immediately, like he did in Venezuela, in a day or 2 days, and create regime change, which, by the way, was never created in Venezuela either. I mean, it's the same regime in Venezuela. It's the vice president of Venezuela who was the president, who was with the Maduro regime in Venezuela, but that they were going to achieve regime change overnight. When that didn't work, I know Pete Hegseth is speaking, but let's wait for the Democrat to get up there, or at least wait till I'm finished talking, because I don't know, I'm just as narcissistic as the rest of these creeps, and I like to hear myself talk. So the first thing was regime change. When that didn't seem to be working out as an excuse for the war because America wasn't buying it, then the next excuse was, and there were multiple excuses in between. They sort of went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. But they, after about a week and a half, 2 weeks, the administration and about 4 or 5 different reasons for this war, the Trump regime decided to settle on that Iran had an imminent nuclear threat. They were days, if not hours, away from having a nuclear weapon. And of course, the response to that, which you heard the congressman say, well, back during Operation Midnight Hammer over the summer, you were also, you told us that you completely obliterated Iran's nuclear capabilities. Completely destroyed these things to the point where the village idiot insisted so strongly that they were completely obliterated. He said, Iran it would take them years and years and years to rebuild. There's no chance of them having a nuclear weapon, to the point where the White House, on the official White House X Twitter, whatever the fuck it is site, they put up a graphic with the White House logo on it saying that Iran's nuclear facilities and capabilities have been completely obliterated. Anything else is fake news. Well, now, several months later, that obliteration, which is what the congressman was getting at, that obliteration, was a lie, right? Because now they are claiming that Iran, the reason that they justify this war, this second war, in cahoots with the Israelis, was because the Iranians were just, hours, minutes, days, a month away from having a nuclear weapon, which we know was a lie too. And when he was challenged on this, and the congressman was basically asking him, look, what are you going to do? What is the plan for getting rid of Iran's nuclear capabilities, which is the enriched uranium, which is buried underground, which we cannot get to unless we have a ground invasion, which we cannot have a ground invasion because even the village idiot, as dumb as he knows, as dumb as he is, knows that if we have the ground invasion, we're going to lose tens of thousands of soldiers. The American people aren't going to like it. It's going to be a catastrophic disaster for the United States, although doesn't mean it won't happen. But as of now, it seems that it seems that it's highly unlikely. So the congressman was just asking, what is the plan? What are you going to do? How are you going to get us to this point where you get rid of, since that's the excuse for the war, where you get rid of the nuclear weapons? Let's just hear what's going on here.
Lead headline reads, quote, Trump tells aides to prepare for an extended blockade of Iran. It goes on to describe, again, the thinking behind the strategy, but also talks about how prolonging the blockade is going to continue to drive up energy costs all over the world. Given the ever-changing messages from this administration on the war strategy and timeline, I really honestly don't expect you to confirm or deny the Journal story. But one thing is clear. The number of transits across the Strait of Hormuz has dropped to the lowest level since the war began, and commodity markets have stopped listening to the happy talk. And crude oil prices this morning have risen to the highest level since the war in Ukraine started in 2022.
$114 a barrel.
AAA reported this morning that the average price of gas is $4.30 a gallon, up 30 cents in 1 week. Diesel's average is $5.45. My friend Mr. Garamendi says in California it's closer to $8 a gallon. And fertilizer prices have also hammered farmers at exactly the same time they're beginning planting all across the country. Aside from the damage this war has done to American consumers, farmers, and small businesses, I want to focus for a minute on the cost of the war and our military readiness, particularly to other combatant commands. Mr. Secretary, you put out a national defense strategy in January, which listed the threat assessment facing our country. China was number one, with the second largest, most powerful military in the world, of course. Russia's nuclear force, clearly it was number two in terms of the threat they pose to the homeland. North Korea, which has missiles that actually can reach U.S. territory, was ranked number three, and Iran was described as, quote, and accurately, after Midnight Hammer, that Iran's regime is weaker and more vulnerable than it has been in decades. Again, this was before February 28th, when the decision was made to go into the military strikes on Iran. So today, we have 3 carrier strike forces in Central Command. The Indo-PACOM, which is where Russia and China are operating their navies, 52% of the globe. We have 1 carrier strike group in Japan, George Washington. And the imbalance in terms of just, what our commitments and, frankly, what our national defense strategy, is just blindingly obvious in terms of what this war is doing. Gerald Ford is on day 312 of its deployment. They've gone through fires, plumbing problems, and, again, an extended deployment, which, in my opinion, is hitting readiness as hard as anything I've seen in the time that I've been on this committee. So, General Kane, in terms of, again, the carrier strike groups that are over there, assuming that we get to some end game here, Ford is not going over to the Indo-Pacific to buttress the gap that exists there today. They've got to go back into pretty heavy repair and availability in terms of trying to recover from their deployment. So again, in terms of just, the decisions about where we're putting people and putting really the most powerful part of our Navy, can you explain, again, what that means in terms of the situation in Indo-PACOM, where China is watching? We saw Mr. Rogers' pretty powerful presentation in terms of the buildup that's happening in that part of the world. How does that align with the National Defense Strategy, which was just put out by this administration in January?
Well, sir, first I want to echo your comments on the Ford Strike Group. fantastic work by incredible
Just
sailors.
shut the fuck up and answer the question.
Not just the Ford herself,
We know you love the
but
troops.
the other ships.
Well, we
as
know you love
well on a
the village
historic
idiot Donald Trump
cruise
more.
doing,
Just
incredible
answer
work
the
for
question.
the nation.
But excuse me, how does that balance with the national?
Well, yes, sir. Happy to answer the way I think about this. The national security strategy and national defense strategy are frameworks, but a president will employ national force and power based on the political and security situations that a president deems appropriate to use that military force. There's always trade-offs in all of these things. I'm confident that the president always carefully considers these readiness trade-offs.
Oh, of course he does.
And I'm sure he has done so in this case based on
carefully considers
based on
things.
the military options that we've presented with the associated risks and
Well,
advice.
to make a trade going after a regime that's weaker and more vulnerable than it has been in decades, which is quote unquote from the Defense Strategies report, does not, in my opinion, in common sense.
Gentleman's time's expired. As you can tell from looking at the dais, votes have been called, so we are now going to stand in recess to the end of this vote. I expect it to take 20 to 25 minutes, but we are now in recess.
All right, guys. So, I wasn't really. I mean, I think that was that. I don't even know who the congressman was that just did that questioning. I wasn't. If you've joined me before for these congressional hearings, I have little patience right now. I have no patience for the Republicans. I can't even listen to them unless I think I can mock them, right? Otherwise, I can't hear anything they have to say. It's not worth listening to because it's so ridiculous and nonsensical at this point. But I also even the last congressman, Democratic congressman, who was asking questions, and I think his questions were effective. But I mean, if I have little patience with Democrats at this point who aren't going to play the political game effectively. That was silly. I mean, it wasn't silly. It was an effective line of questioning, but it was the wrong questioning at the right moment. Like, there is no excuse right now why Democrats aren't coordinated. And if we see this through the entire hearing, as we've seen in other hearings, I'm going to lose my mind. I just need to meditate or something. There is no reason in my mind, and feel free to tell me if you disagree with me. I get it. I absolutely get it. If I'm wrong and you make a good argument, I'm willing to just surrender this line of thought. But it gets so frustrating when I see what I consider to be political stupidity at the moment. Who the fuck cares about General Kane? He's a mouthpiece with a uniform, sitting in this hearing. Not to degrade his years of service. I'm sure he's an honorable service record. But the fact that he's the asshole that said that he would kill for Donald Trump and then he got this position for that, I have no respect for him. No respect for him at all. So he's a mouthpiece. He's a prop. He's a political prop for Donald Trump that you're putting a uniform on. And you're giving legitimacy to absolute stupidity, right? And nonsense. So I don't have the tolerance for that. And don't waste your time in this hearing hammering or even challenging General Kane, because General Kane doesn't matter. General Kane is irrelevant. Also, there's not a soundbite you're going to get on cable news and on the internet of General Kane. You're going to get a soundbite when you go in there and you hammer drunken Pete Hegseth on all his misstatements, on all his bullshit, on all his nonsense, on his lies, exaggerations, misinformation, on his general ignorance, on his unfitness for the job, on the fact that that it's obvious now why we shouldn't hire a weekend Fox News host to be the Secretary of Defense for the United States of America. Right? Hammer Pete Hegseth on his war crimes, on his threats of no quarter to the enemy, which directly defies the Geneva Convention. Hammer him on his Jesus runs our military meetings, where he not only does he defy the separation between church and state, but he all but demands that the military now be an operating extremist religious, war machine for good Jesus-loving Americans that he's actually brought up in his, weekly or bi-weekly Pentagon prayer services. Challenge him on the fact that make a fool out of him, back him into a corner. He supposedly read, he thought the supposed great Christian thought he was reading a passage from the book of Psalms in the Old Testament, talking about the incredible war fighters and how God gave him permission and then permission to rain hellfire down on the enemy. It was some shit like that. When we find out, when the internet went crazy 20 minutes later and credible reporters from news outlets confirmed that that wasn't actually from the Psalms, it was Samuel L. Jackson quoting his version of a psalm in the movie Pulp Fiction, right? That was a rewrite of a psalm by Quentin Tarantino for that movie. That, that this asshole Pete Hegseth, performative Christianity is really, written by the book of, it's not from, the book of Exodus or the book of Genesis or the book of Leviticus or in the New Testament, the book of John or the book of Peter or Paul. It's written from the book of Quentin Tarantino. Humiliate him on that. Back him against the wall. People's lives are at risk. My lighting is also awful. The sun just changed, so I got to get a little bit brighter. So anyway, I'm off on a tangent here. So it's a total sham. You're absolutely right, Gail. It's completely ridiculous. And I agree with you with all you're saying. I'm so disgusted that I don't think I can stay with you and attend and listen anymore because I've run out of my antacid. Completely and totally understandable. I think what I'm going to do while they are on recess is I don't think I'm going to babble in your ear for the next 20 minutes while we're waiting for these guys to come back. So I think the best bet would be, and also because, I apologize to the Substack community. As you guys have seen while you're watching that live, we still have this god-awful glitching going on, and I haven't found a replacement streaming platform yet. So, but there's no way I could run this stream where I'm live streaming a C-SPAN live stream through Substack's native streaming platform. So I apologize for how glitchy it is. I'm also live streaming this to YouTube and Instagram. On Instagram, my handle is just Mitch Ivan, MITCHEIVEN. On Instagram, on YouTube, we're at Zenocracy, ZENOCRACY, ZENOCRACY. If the stream is too frustrating in Substack, please pop over to one of those other platforms. That being said, it's hard to make this pitch now with the crappy stream, but Substack is our home base. Zenocracy.news, ZENOCRACY.news is our home base. That's where all the videos are posted first. All my interviews are posted over there first. Eventually, we move them over to YouTube. That's where, that's basically where I'm able to garner the most support. Please consider coming over to Substack. Even though we have some weird live streaming interviews, I'm working on some solutions for that. That's really our home base, and please consider coming over there and becoming a subscriber to support my work. On that note, my friends, I'm going to wrap this live right now. We'll come back in about 20-25 minutes or so. We'll kind of let this hearing start running again. Even C-SPAN, it looks like has stopped their feed because the House called a recess. And we'll sort of pick it up where we left off, and we'll see if it's worth continuing to cover it. For those of you that may not come back, I totally get it. 1 minute at a time, 1 hour at a time, one day at a time, one live at a time. That's how we get through this Trump administration. That's how we get through these 4 years. We've already made it through 2+ years. God knows how. You just keep coming through, keep showing up when you can. You just sort of chunk as much as you can. You take as much as you can, and you take a break when you need to. see you guys in a little bit. I'm going to end the Instagram live first, and then we'll. I'm sorry. Oh yeah, so I have to end the Instagram live first, then we'll wrap up the other two streaming platforms because I have to click 2 separate buttons. Instagram, we'll see you again in just about a half hour or so. Thank you. So Instagram live is ended, and for everybody else, we're going to wrap the